Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to launch this next session of our 7-part series, which is going to be all about how to find the right investment property for your needs. So it's my pleasure to welcome my friends and inspiration for real estate investing, Leah Solomon and Jason Holliday, dialing in from Brooklyn, New York, and a good friend, Scott Harvey, dialing in from Los Angeles. So we'll definitely be hearing a lot from them and talking about how investments can be different in different cities. One of our goals with this series is to open people's eyes to different ways to look at investing, and that investing doesn't necessarily have to be done in your backyard. So we wanted to create a couple different perspectives today that we'll be diving into to see how it's different in these two markets in particular. There are certain other ones that I think we'll kind of talk about anecdotally as well, that I think are relevant and sort of hotbeds for real estate investment around the country. And the idea is to get people to expand their thinking beyond just investing in an area where they can have a short commute to fix a problem at a rental property. So we really appreciate you joining us. If you don't mind, please post in the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. We do have people dialing in from all different parts of the country, so we'd love to hear where you're dialing in from, and also at least one thing that you'd like to take away from today's session, which again is about trying to find the right investment properties and how to build your team around you to do that. And then if you have any questions throughout the session, please post those in the chat as well, and we'll make sure that we get to them during the Q&A. So the bidding starts now. Whoever the first is to post in there gets a prize. I don't know what the prize is, but we'll figure it out later. So just some procedural stuff for those of you dialing in who are part of the Financial Planning Association of Metro New York. At the end of the session, we will put up a slide that has a URL and a unique code that you can put into that website in order to claim your CE credits. That is only available for those who are attending the session live. So all of you who are listening in right now are going to be eligible for that. Those who will be looking at the recording later, unfortunately, will not. It has to be a live session in order to get the CE credits. And for those of you who are not following us yet on Instagram, our account is a great way to stay up to date on these types of sessions and other things that we'll be offering throughout the year. So please follow us there at the Bridge Loan Guy. You'll see my beautiful face all over it. And that's a great way to stay connected about different opportunities like this one. So today we are going to be talking about how to find your the best investment property for your needs and different strategies, which we talked about briefly last week when we covered different investment strategies such as fix and flip, long-term hold, short-term rentals versus long-term rentals, and we'll get into some of those details with our panelists today. As far as next sessions coming up, next week we have a great financial advisor who's going to be joining us, who will talk about all the different aspects of how to make sure that you're financially ready to invest in real estate, what it means if you try to be an all-cash buyer, and how either you or your clients are actually losing out on tremendous amounts of money if you don't use that money and invest it elsewhere. So we're actually going to do a comparison of how much interest you might pay over 10, 20, and 30 years versus how much net worth you might grow if you finance and leverage. It's one of the important points of our series here. The following week, we'll be talking to a real estate attorney who will talk about LLC held titles and why that can be beneficial, how that might affect financing, and some other important aspects of the legal side of real estate. We'll then talk about insurance in the next session, which I know is not known to be an exciting topic, but I think there's some really relevant and important things that we'll be discussing, such as, why do you need title insurance in markets where you have the choice whether you want to do both owners and lenders policies? Is that advisable or not? Should you do a survey when you buy a property? And I'll share one of my own personal experiences, which is a big blunder on my part, that I want all of you to learn from as it relates to that. We'll talk about with the CPA the week after that to talk about all the tax benefits, and there are so many of them to be able to take advantage with real estate investing. And we'll wrap up the series with a discussion about 1031 exchanges and how to defer your capital gains tax to the next property, and keep doing that over and over and over again, in hopes that until you sell a property and want to take the money out and splurge on a big trip to Hawaii, how you'll be able to defer those gains until you decide to pull that money out permanently. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to start with my good friends Leah and Jason in Brooklyn. If you don't mind, maybe introduce yourself to the group and, talk about what you do, both, in your own investing world personally, and also how you help clients as well.
Hey, from Brooklyn.
There. So I'll start. Our investing history goes all the way back to 1998. Leah and I came from Western Canada to New York City with $20,000, and we absolutely wanted to buy a place. We'd never bought a piece of property before. Our parents, I think, had maybe bought 1 or 2 properties each, so we didn't come from a family that was familiar with real estate investing. But when you're in your 20s and you're coming to New York City, you want to be a player. We wanted to find an apartment to buy, but we had very little money, $20,000. So we started looking in Manhattan and realized that was way too much money. We came out to Brooklyn, and we basically kept moving out, farther out from the prime neighborhoods until we found something that we could afford. I think the asking price was $88,000. It's a 1-bedroom co-op. And it's a long story, but we finally got that. We finally got that co-op. We had, Leah was going to school at the time. I had a day job doing project management for a company in Manhattan. We lived in that apartment for 2 years. We had always thought of it as an investment, but after 2 years, we actually thought, maybe New York City wasn't for us. We decided to put it on the market and probably rent until Leo was done school, and then maybe move back to Canada. Anyways, we called in real estate agents. Lo and behold, after 2 years, the value of it had doubled. We put it on the market. Couldn't believe that we could possibly get that price for it, and we did. So that completely opened up our eyes to what was happening in New York City at the time. And we immediately went out and bought our second apartment. We lived in it for probably 4 or 5 months, sold it, bought a third one, lived in it for a few months, did some cosmetic fix-ups, sold it. And the market at that time was moving so quickly. We thought, of course, that we were geniuses, but in fact, a lot of it was what was actually happening in the market. So over the next 3 or 4 years, I think we bought maybe 12 or 14 apartments, a ton of them. And because we didn't have kids, we kept moving from one to another. Then we started buying multiples, fixing them up. And then we finally raised enough money that we could buy single family houses. And then we started doing heavy cosmetic renovations, and then total gut renovations. And so over the last 20 years, we've basically done it all. Co-ops, condos, we bought co-ops and condos at foreclosures. We've done rental holds, we've done 1031 exchanges, we've done Airbnb rental purchases. And we've made a ton of mistakes. We've had an enormous amount of fun. And maybe I'll leave it there. And Mark, you can pick on any points that you'd like to tease out a little bit. I think you're on mute.
So I got it. Thank you. So one of the things that I think is most important about investing, and I'm assuming that this is a big part of why you were successful, is that you can't do it all yourself, right? So you've probably built over time your team of experts that you turn to over and over and over again. What I've found with my own real estate investing and seeing other people that are successful with it is that they find something that works and they repeat it and they repeat it, and they go back to the same team members to help them with that investment, whether it be a real estate agent to help them locate the properties, a contractor, an attorney, CPA, all these people that support your efforts. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you built your team, maybe some missteps that you made along the way, if there are any. I'm sure there were, because real estate investing is never a perfect science. But maybe talk about how you built your team and what that team looks like, what components there are.
I'll let Leah talk about the team, but I just want to, one of our very first mistakes was actually, and you said it beautifully, you know, that you've got to sort of create this group around you. When we started out, we were so obsessed with just searching for the properties that we didn't put that team together at all. So we didn't have someone to help us with financing. We didn't have a good lawyer. We missed all of these things, and it is the most obvious first mistake that anyone can make. So you've heard it here. Please don't go out and chase properties before you have a good idea of who you're going to use.
Yeah, I mean, our team came through trial and error. You have to work with different people and get to know them and find out who's really good at the job. I mean, we found, and the key players are, of course, financing, as Jason mentioned, and Mark, you know us very well through financing. We worked with you so many times. That's a huge one because, and a CPA, this sort of financial team, knowing what you can actually afford and making sure you don't get yourself in over your head. I mean, that's key. Nobody wants to be stressed about their investment. You want to feel good about it. So that took time. It took us a while to find you, finding the right attorney so that you're, no matter how much you know, there are always pitfalls and potential problems, and having a really great attorney is so important. Despite when we found a great attorney who happened to be the attorney for a co-op building that we were buying, and then we noticed how professional she was, and just she knew more than anyone else there, more than all the other attorneys. So we latched onto her, and she's been our attorney since then. But and she's always given us great advice. We haven't always listened, for example.
See, that's a really important part about having a good team around you. You must trust them.
You have to listen to them. And sometimes it's turned out okay. Like the first house we bought had tenants who were kind of squatters in there, and I mean, in today's, we just never would have done that again. I mean, that could have been such a disaster. And we were lucky that we were able to help them find a place. And we were just so lucky that it all worked out. We got them relocated and they were happy. But she warned us, and we really should have taken that advice. But that's another story. And with contractors, I mean, it's really trial and error to find people. And you start with smaller jobs with people and try them out, and you have to, they have to sort of earn their place. We've also, contractors will start taking advantage of you if you use them too often. So we've had problems.
Well, that's been a challenge. I think because our business, you know, we look for places that need gut renovations now. So contractors have become absolutely key to us. And you know, even searching for a property, you want to have a contractor. If you see something that needs more work than what you can sort of wrap your mind around, you need to be able to call that contractor and have him show up at the house within a day. You know, properties like that go fast, and you have to have that tight of a relationship. One really interesting thing that we've learned with our contractors, which is I think a little bit counterintuitive, when they give us prices for certain work, we don't haggle with them anymore. We say, okay, excellent. Thank you for that price. We'll pay you. When can you start? And basically after that, it's on them to perform. We've given them what they wanted, and now we expect them to do their absolute best job with no question. And that's, you know, everyone wants to sort of get construction done for less. That's the wrong, if you're looking to build a long-term team, trust the people and let them fail on their own. Don't second guess them and pay them what they want. And then if it doesn't work out, you know, they have no excuses.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that, you know, every professional wants to feel valued no matter what aspect you play in this. So if you're constantly chipping away at them and ask them to reduce their fee or reduce this or cut this, cut that, what's going to happen is the quality of your work is going to go down. And then if you're in the game, which you guys definitely are, of major renovation at this point, I mean, obviously you built up to that stage, but you guys, the contractor is such a crucial part for you guys because of the strategy that you've used and found that works well for you. So I would agree with that point, that you can't shortchange those people financially, or they'll move on to other jobs. You have turnover, you have people you can't trust, and that can be a big factor. So I think that's a great point to get across for sure. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, how do you identify when you found a good investment? Because I think people who are new to this process, who are kind of, you guys are obviously much more established, which is why you're on this panel. But a lot of people who are going to be attending and listening to this event are people who are new to investment, and they don't know if they're looking at a good investment or a bad one. And I realize that this is kind of a vague question because people may take different strategies with how they invest, whether it be long-term hold or renovation. But just in your experience, how do you analyze whether a property you're looking at is a good investment or not?
There's two things. There's time spent on the street, and there's time spent on spreadsheets. Those are the two key things. So basically, you need to spend enough time in the neighborhood looking around at different types of properties. I mean, now it's much easier because you can do so much of this online. But you need to be an absolute, in the neighborhoods that you choose to work in. And I mean, New York City is vast. We've basically said, okay, Brooklyn is our world. If Brooklyn was a city on its own, it would be the fourth or fifth largest in the States. So I mean, this is a good home base for us. Basically, we've picked a small number of neighborhoods and have become experts in those neighborhoods. You need to be able to walk into a place and know immediately, almost intuitively, that, wow, this place is overpriced, or wow, this is actually a pretty good deal. It has to be that intuitive. You have to have done so much research that you know it immediately. And if there's a question in your mind, you're not sure, you're not ready. So what we look for are things we call no-brainers. We walk in and we look at one another, and it's like, we don't even have to think about this. And once you get that feeling, you know that you're an expert, and your risk plummets. It just plummets. So that's what we call time on the street, looking around, seeing a ton of things. And then the spreadsheet stuff is really like the financing, the carrying costs, the holding, all of that stuff, just to make sure that at the end of the day, the numbers really do make sense.
Yeah, and just to flesh that out a little bit, clearly, the first step is to talk to your financial advisors, your CPA, your mortgage broker, know your financial situation, know how much of a renovation, if you're doing a renovation, if you just want to do cosmetics, or whether it's a long-term hold rental, we're landlords, we've been landlords forever as well, or something that you're going to renovate and sell, whether it's a small renovation or a large, you need to know how much of a renovation you're able to do. Like, I have worked with clients who said, oh yes, we want to renovate a building, but then we go and look at a bunch of buildings that need renovation, and we talk to them about the kinds of things that this building will need in order to be either a viable rental property, or somewhere, an investment property, or something for them to sell. And then I tell them to imagine doing this, working with the contractor and putting in the time. Do you actually have time to source all these things and to be on site every day and all of this stuff? And it's a real wake-up call for people. So you also have to know that, what you have the appetite for. And once you sort of put all those pieces together, you'll have sort of a clearer idea of what you can take on. And then, one benefit of us being agents is we know certain areas really well. And so we augment our clients' understanding of the neighborhood. You identify, for example, in certain, people call neighborhoods up and coming. And that just means it's changing in some way. So what kind of people are needing to rent in an area? So the kind of rental you'd want would be, if it's skewing toward families, then you'd want to get a rental with 3-bedroom units, or a house to rent instead of a 1-bedroom unit. So you have to know what's in demand in that area, and then you try to find a property that fits that demand and that you can make beautiful. And then there's the spreadsheeting part comes in.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know how much you could rent it for, what all your inputs are, and is it actually viable? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think if so, Leah, as we usually do in our relationship, she reminds me of things that I totally forget. So, you know, I basically said, you got to know the street, you got to know your spreadsheets. Leah's point is, well, wait, before you do any of that, you really have to narrow down what it is that you're willing to do, you know, and that means, you know, how much money you're willing to spend. And also, you know, how much of a management job do you want out of all this? What's your time capacity for managing this thing? Not only, you know, the renovation of it, but also if it's a rental or if it's a sale. So yeah, thanks.
That's great. And what you guys were talking about the spreadsheet is important, because I think a lot of mistakes are made by newer investors where they assume best case scenario on everything. Both this, you know, if they're flipping a property, what it sell for, that the market's, you know, obviously not always just peak all of a sudden right when you're ready to sell. And sometimes you can be working against the market, and that can be, you know, it could be a riskier endeavor. Now, obviously, you guys are more experienced, so you know how to read those markets. You're in them every day. I love the point about knowing what is desirable in those areas. And I know what you're referring to. There are certain neighborhoods of Brooklyn that are very heavy family neighborhoods. So ones where it's common for people to have multiple children, and you need to build to what is desirable in those areas. I think that's a really, really great point. So one thing I wanted to add to the questions to you guys is, when you're developing a property like that or renovating doing a significant renovation, how do you know at the end of it if it's better to sell it or to rent it?
Well, that's an excellent question. We make that decision before we start the project. And I think only rarely have we pivoted on that. Speaking of unexpected things, in September of 2008, the financial crisis, the same month that Lehman Brothers went down, we had a place that we had worked for a full year on renovating. And it was a massive renovation. It was probably $400,000 or $500,000, which at that time was a ton of money for us. And we had the decision at that moment, you know, the market is terrible. You know, the stock market is dropping like 700 points a day, it felt like. And we still made the decision to go ahead and sell the property. So basically, when we start these projects, we have a particular game plan, and even the financial crisis wasn't enough to throw us off of that. It has everything to do with what our cash flow is, what our financing situation is. Sometimes the commitments you make early basically dictate what you have to do. It's always nice if you can build in a little bit of elasticity in that, so that you can pivot at the end if you need to. It hurt us a ton to have to sell that property. I wish that we had had a little bit more room to maneuver at the end, but we didn't. So to answer your question, you know, it depends on the type of financing you have, what other projects you have lined up coming after it that you might need cash for, other commitments that you've made, and what you see the long-term, you know, outcome being. So it can go either way.
Mark, you made a huge point that I want to just highlight, which is that a lot of people plan for the best case scenario. They plan for an optimal or pretty close to optimal scenario in their investments. And we don't do that. And we're kind of always reminding people that things happen, and things happen all the time. When we're spreadsheeting out, Jason's a spreadsheet guy, but he does several different scenarios. One is a great, wonderful scenario. One is a terrible, really bad scenario. And one is a kind of likely middle scenario. And we don't ever make decisions based on the great optimal scenario. We make it on the middle to what if it's bad scenario. And that's how we came up with the idea of no brainer, because even in a pretty bad scenario, it still works out and we're still okay. And that's really the only way that you want to move into a real estate investment, unless you're willing to lose whatever you've put into it. You know, if you don't care, that's fine, but most people do care. things always happen. And so we're always, always telling people to be prepared, have money set aside just in case, be prepared that everything's going to take twice as long as you think, that the market might go down, whatever, just be prepared for all of these contingencies.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the things that novice investors miss is the cost to carry the property in the meantime, because you're still having to pay taxes and whatever mortgage you borrowed and all that. And I think that's a really critical piece as well. So I would say, and I'd love to get your, yeah.
Yeah, one more thing that people miss a lot is that they see an apartment or a house. It looks like it just needs a new kitchen and a new bathroom. You think it's just totally cosmetic. There is always something big, not always, a lot of times you discover something. And so you always need to build in, you just be prepared for that.
Yeah, that contingency is really critical, because the biggest and most expensive problems are usually the ones that are hiding, that you can't see on the surface, right? The structural stuff, the mold that you didn't know was behind the walls until you open them up, and you have to be prepared to cover those, because once you've acquired the property, you can't return it. It's not like, shopping at Amazon where they'll take anything back. Once you bought it, that's it. You're pretty much stuck with it. So yeah, Jason.
Our minds play tricks on us in unexpected ways. I think a lot of people can walk into a house or an apartment and say, oh, this clearly needs a new kitchen. And the mind sort of stops there. It's like, okay, we have to redo the kitchen. The second step to that, which even we struggle with sometimes, is saying, okay, how does this place look with a brand new kitchen? And what a lot of people miss is that everything else looks like crap after you put in a brand new kitchen. It can actually accentuate all of the other stuff that you don't even see, because now you've done this kitchen, it elevates that, but oh my God, now we've got to do all this other stuff, or else it just looks like we put this new kitchen in this crappy place. So project creep is real, and it's not always a bad thing. I mean, there can be advantages to doing a little bit more, but that is, again, another reason to leave a huge ton of money, a huge percentage of your total construction budget for these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I would say you guys are somewhat case in point is to that investors really make their money at acquisition, not at sale, right? Because you have to know that your deal is right and that you're acquiring the right property that has the room for an increase in value. But if you make that wrong decision at the beginning, it's very hard to come back from that, especially if you're in the world where you guys are, where you're doing major renovation. Once you're in, you can't stop halfway. Have you guys seen any other builders, or has this ever happened to you where a builder just says, they throw in the towel and just say, I can't finish this project? I mean, I would assume those are the types of properties you guys are looking to acquire, not to hand off. Hopefully you haven't been on that side of it, but maybe you can talk a little bit about why that might happen to certain people, if you've seen that come up in the past.
We're laughing, and I pointed like this because right outside this window, we look out at where we're working from home, and we're looking out across the street. There's this horrible building which we bought. And we bought two buildings actually on this block across the street from our house, and we did one, and it was beautiful. It was a very successful project, a 2-family. But as we were doing it, we realized it was a lot of work, and we realized that the second one was in worse shape than the first, and it was just more infrastructure, more structural work than we wanted to do. And so it just so happened, and we could have done it, but we just didn't. We had other things we wanted to do. So we sold it. We sold it to another developer. And then that developer just gave up on it. And it now is this collapsing shell. Like describe it.
No, collapsing shell is a good way to describe it.
It's a horrible eyesore. So, it is terrible.
So your question though, so we've been on both sides of this. We've bought places that other developers have thrown in the towel on.
Yes.
And we have thrown in the towel and sold places. So what changes? It's almost always financing. 80% of it is financing. And that is why having your financing tight, figured out before you go chasing after buildings is so important, because crazy things happen in the middle of projects. And, you know, there's from my bike ride from my house to where my kids go to school, there are 3 properties that we've been watching where developers threw in the towel. And I know that it's because the construction costs exceeded the amount of money that they had. I'm sure there's always a few secondary things. I'm a rock climber and I love to read other reports that are put out, like what causes accidents. And it's never just one thing going wrong. It's like 2 or 3 things going wrong. Most people can handle like, okay, you know, you drop your ropes, okay? You know, you have a spare rope, you know, you can sort that out. But oh, now it's starting to rain. The complexity has just gone up tenfold. And then it starts to get dark because you started too late. So those 3 things combined, that is a full-blown accident. So when we're planning for a real estate project, you know, we're anticipating what could go wrong, you know, and everyone can imagine 1 or 2 obvious things, but throw in a few like, you know, number 3 and number 4, things that you don't anticipate at all, and imagine them all happening at once. That's when serious accidents and mistakes happen. And that's what we kind of try to plan for. And when all else fails, you put it on the market.
Well, you know, that's one of the cool things about real estate is that there are ways to pivot. You know, when you invest in other types of investments, not that those aren't important as well, the only option is to sell them. So if you're buying stocks, you can't, you know, renovate a stock, right? You're sort of dependent and you don't have control over the value of that stock. It's based on what's happening in the market and maybe what the, you know, the board of directors is doing or whatever it may be, the trajectory of that company. But with real estate, you really have more control to decide, okay, I'm going to, you know, sell this one at a loss. I can move to the next one, or I'm going to hang on to it as a rental because the market's not right. If you have to pivot. So I think real estate's pretty cool in that it gives you the option to do different things to, you know, save your investment or hopefully better yet, even enhance it and make a bigger profit. So I have one last question for you guys before we jump over to Scott. So just in terms of your market, I know you guys are really heavy in Brooklyn, which is a great market and has done very well over the years. What would you say the entry point is for somebody who wants to do, let's just say a basic renovation of either an apartment or a house, to do what you do and kind of like the entry level for someone who hasn't done this before, who may want to get started? Like what price point are you thinking somebody might need to be in your general area? It doesn't have to be in the immediate area that you guys work in, but just in that general area.
Yeah, I think for a condo, purchase price is going to be between $750,000 and $1 million. Of course, I mean, that's the minimum. And then you would want to have probably, you know, $50,000 to $100,000 for the renovation. For a single family house, purchase price is say between 1.75 and 2 million. And for that, you'd want to have $200,000 to $250,000 to do the renovation.
If it's a mostly cosmetic renovation.
Yeah, and a year's worth of time.
Right. So let's say we take the $1 million example. So if you need, let's just say your financing requires about 25% down. So that's about 250,000 plus another 100,000 to renovate at an entry level point. So you really need to have a good amount of cash on hand. One thing I've seen some successful investors do is also team up with other people. So if they don't have that amount of cash, doesn't mean you can't get started. It means you might need to build a team of actual investors to be able to make that project happen, which is another a way to kind of dive in and maybe reduce the overall risk if you're not doing it all on your own. And I've seen people who kind of got started in their investment career doing that. And I think it's been a fairly effective tool. Obviously, be careful who you invest with, because when money's involved, it can turn things sour in a relationship pretty quickly if things aren't going well. But if you have the right, and this is part of the discussion with the attorney as well, which will happen in a couple of weeks, is how to make sure you protect yourself if you do invest with other people. So I think that's going to be an important topic to cover as well. So Jason, Leah, thank you guys so much. You have such a wealth of knowledge to share with everybody, and really, really appreciate it. So my good friend Scott with the amazing corner 3 jump shot. Scott and I are good buddies. And Scott has actually helped me with some of my investment properties. So I want to introduce Scott Harvey from Figure 8 Realty in Los Angeles. Scott is a great resource. I'll let you talk about yourself, but just as an introduction, one of Scott's main roles as an agent is helping his clients find investment opportunities, whether it be flips or long-term holds. And so, Scott, if you don't mind, you'll be better at introducing yourself than I will. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your own investing and what your strategies are, and then also about how you help your clients as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. My name's Scott Harvey. I work for Figure 8 Realty in Los Angeles, and we're a boutique brokerage on the east side of LA. So we serve our clients all over Los Angeles, though, west side, Hollywood Hills, and even outside of LA, just wherever we can find the best investment at the time. So my broker was really smart of him. He just kept hearing about his clients, saying they would like investment properties, not just a property for themselves, but they didn't want to be landlords. So they, would love to buy a 2 to 4 unit, but just didn't want to collect the rent, deal with the tenant's maintenance request and the bills. So he started his own property management company in-house, as well as a construction company. So Figure 8's now kind of a one-stop shop for an investor, where they can we can teach them the whole process. From, if there's some vacancies in some of the units, we'll make them a little prettier before leasing it for them, and then collecting the rent, paying their bills. And at the end of the month, all you have to do is just read the statement that shows all the income that's come in, all the expenses, and then you get the cash flow put in your bank account. So, when I started 2014, I was a new agent in 2015, didn't really know how it all worked. And my broker just kind of looked at me one day and was like, I found a really good 3-unit. Like, this is one of the best ones I've seen all year. He's like, you need to buy this. And I was like, I can't buy that. I don't think I have the money to buy that. I don't know what I'm doing at all yet. And he's like, you need to get this. And so after a lot of due diligence and a lot of people telling me not to buy it, I bought it. And it was one of, the best decisions, completely changed my life, where getting like an asset like that, with some risk. I got it in a up and coming neighborhood by USC campus, which, in 2015 wasn't like it is now, which is, all the flippers came in after that and stuff. But it really worked out well. And I was able to learn through doing it myself. And then I started helping clients and other people do it themselves. You can own or occupy a unit, but I chose to keep my rental. But after, buttoning up the building, getting all 3 rented for top market rents, the goal is to have maybe 1 unit pay the mortgage, 1 unit pay property tax, insurance, and bills, and then the 3rd unit be cash flow every month in your pocket. So, those are my favorite, the 2 to 4 units, because you can get conventional loans. Having multiple doors gives you opportunity, which happened to me, where if someone moves out and the rents are a lot higher than they used to be, you then, can rent it for more, making the numbers better, your equity go up, all while having the tenants pay your loan for you and all your bills. And so that worked out really well for me. And then I started helping clients.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's interesting to see the different models, because you are, if I can put words in your mouth, more of a buy and hold type of investor, where you collect rents over time, and you're looking at market rents and increasing those rents and renovating the apartments to increase the rents, which is obviously a bit different approach than Leah and Jason. So why is it that you choose that specific option? Because you could probably renovate and flip if you chose to, but why have you chosen that model?
Sure. I'm just kind of learned a lot from my broker, trying to slowly build wealth. Where this 3-unit I got for $580, and then a lot of good things happened that were kind of even out of my control. 2 months after I bought it, they announced the Metro line, the station right there on Crenshaw and Expo, is going to be the first station to go to the ocean, to Santa Monica. So that was huge. I was got a little lucky there. And then they now announced that's going to be the station that's going to go to LAX. So the neighborhood completely changed. So I could potentially flip it, but instead I decided to do a cash out refinance. And the rents, the cash flow is really good on this one. So I was able to pull out 200, increase my loan amount 200. This is like 4 or 5 years later, and then buy another one and still have the rents at that one cover the new mortgage and expenses. So instead of flipping, decided to do cash out refi, buy another, and just try to kind of keep going, keep getting more doors.
Yeah, there's a method that we talked about in the last session, the BRRRR method, right? And basically it's buy, renovate, rent, refinance, because you've now increased the value of your property, to cash money out, and then repeat, do it again on another property. And you do that over and over and over again. If you're buying the right properties and you're getting the right rents and you're making smart decisions about the renovations. And again, we talked about this earlier, where you find a model that works for you and you just keep doing it over and over and over. It sounds like that's what you do. You like the multiple units, it works for you. You know the areas that you're looking to buy in where you get the most value, rental income relative to the cost of the property. And it seems like you repeat that over and over. So maybe you can talk about why you do that, rather than recreating the wheel.
It is getting a little tougher now. I think, in the last 6 years, LA, it's almost been hard to make a mistake because the rents are so high and the prices have just been going up. But it is really important. Location was huge, picking these up and coming areas. I mean, you have to know your rents. You could buy a place where a 1-bedroom's $3,000, but then 5 minutes down the street, you can only get max, $1,850 or $2,000, because there's just the neighborhoods, there's so many of them and they're all so different. But with repeating it, I did it once, and then I decided the next one to go in with a partner, where you don't want to over leverage yourself too much. It sounds great to just keep refinancing, keep buying, keep getting them, but you got to be really careful, because I was only able to do it because the numbers were so good on mine. If you're just having all your mortgage and everything covered but no cash flow, then if you do that refinance and buy another, you're going to be negative cash flow on your first one. So you just got to be really careful, make sure the numbers make sense before you do the refinance and buy another one, with a little buffer room too.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because the cash flow is critical. And usually, in my opinion, at least my own strategy is that I try to make sure I have some positive cash flow, not because I'm actually expecting to make money off it necessarily, but to cover those unexpected expenses. And
Yeah.
I've had my own missteps and problems arise. And then, I mentioned on the last session, I'm getting sued by a neighbor over a property line that I inherited from the prior owner. 6 months after buying the property, get slapped with a lawsuit on a property line I didn't create. And, you just can't predict these things. So you have to be willing and able to take those bumps. But I think that is relevant also for our next session with a financial advisor, about knowing when you're actually ready. Like, how much cash should you have as a buffer to be able to overcome some of these issues? And maybe if you are doing the model that you mentioned where you're cashing money out, maybe you set some of that aside for your contingency, so you have that safety net in case, again, one of my problems, I had a roof blow off of one of my properties in the mountains.
Great.
Unexpected windstorm, that sucks, windows cracked, lights basically ripped off the house, and there goes the roof. Fortunately, I had insurance, which is another topic we're going to be talking about. But even without, the deductible, it's $5,000 out the door. And then maybe I wanted to upgrade some of these materials, and then, and then it adds up. So I think you made a good point that you never want to, if you can avoid it, never want to just be cash flow neutral. You need to have a little bit of a cushion of profit there, which can help you have the funds available to make those, those unexpected expenses covered. So when you're building your team, it sounds like you have a network of people, whether it be the broker that you work for or other individuals. Like, how do you identify a good property when you found one? Like, how do you know, okay,
Sure.
like what Jason and Leah were talking about, it's the no-brainer method. Like, do you have some mechanism for identifying that? And if so, how do you go about that?
Well, with multi-units in LA, there's a ton of factors where, it could be vacancies. First, you got to look at what the, 3 units are collecting in rent. Usually they're low, or if, there's a vacancy or two, that's where you can really capitalize off it. Where, mine were vacant and the agent said the projected rents were, 1650 and 1850. And I completely disagreed with him, and was able to capitalize off that, where he was marketing as that, where I was able to get 1995 and 2500. So just by capitalizing off the listing agent not knowing the rents in the area could be one way to find a good one. Or a lot of other agents may just be looking at his projected rents and believe him, or think, okay, that must be what I could rent it for. But if you know the areas and the rent, you could capitalize off that. So vacancies, and also, location is the biggest one probably. And then, there's a whole property evaluation you need to do, and, put in all these costs that, maintenance and stuff that, you might not even think about, and then still making sure it will cash flow. And I mean, you can also get one where, you see the numbers are always changing, you want it to be getting better, but like when a tenant moves out, that's when, as long as you're willing to hold it, that's when you could really capitalize on it. And there's one other new thing in LA, the ADUs. So there's accessory dwelling units, where they passed a law where, there's such low inventory, they want more housing. So they made it where if you buy a duplex and it has, a garage in the back down the driveway, you can now convert that into a legal unit and rent it out, and, making it a 3 unit without having to have parking for the people, as long as you're like close to a bus stop or a metro or something that pretty much every place is. So now you can, if the numbers aren't quite making sense, but there's, 2 garages in the back, you could convert those, a duplex into a 4 unit, and maybe the rents aren't making sense, but then now you're talking, you get 1850 for each of those ADUs, and then it really makes sense. So there's just so many factors, but there's also a lot of bad listings that don't make sense. So you really got to just try to find those winners that are in there.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I learned through my own experience of looking for investment properties is that, and I didn't know this at first, unfortunately, I found out before I acquired my next property, but the rental laws in each city, you really need to know those. So for example, maybe you can talk about how, in LA County, that you can only raise rent a certain amount if your tenant doesn't leave voluntarily, and, how that affects your investments.
Yeah, with multi-units, it's a lot different than just buying, a single family for yourself, where that's, do I like it? Do I like the house? Do I like the neighborhood? You have to look into zoning, a lot of factors where, like, new construction, for example, if it's built after a certain date, there's actually no rent control. Where if it's built before that date, like most of these multi-units in LA, there's rent control. So, you can't just go in there and there's 3 tenants paying low rent and up their rent. You can only raise it about 3 or 4% a year, which a lot of them just don't make sense. It would take you, forever to just come to cash flow. So, I mean, there's the rent control, new constructions don't have that, which is pretty big. And then also, like you said, yeah, like looking into, can I build another unit on this lot? Or, I mean, sometimes the listing agent will list a 3 unit and it's legally a duplex, and it's up to you to make sure your client notices that, and you tell them that, and they, find that out through due diligence before you purchase it. And then the city tells you to convert it back into a duplex, which has definitely happened. And, but there's just a lot of factors that you need to look through, which is why you have an agent help you and property management help you after the fact. So you're not the one dealing with the tenants and, you know, the city. And we have, you know, I have all the inspections from the city or whatever. They go straight to property management. They handle it. I don't want to know or know anything like that.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that. I think property management is definitely something that people want to build into their budgets. I'm a big proponent of it. I use it on all of the properties that I own because I need to be able to do things like this and my day job. And that's what pays my bills. I'm creating wealth through real estate, but I'm not paying my day-to-day bills. That's not my goal. It's to build, it's a long-term game. You have to be focused on it as a long-term investment. And even if you are flipping properties, it's still a bigger picture, long-term, you know, rolling money from one project to the next. It's a long play. It's not a get rich quick scheme. And I think that's what a lot of investors think it is because they've watched HGTV shows, you know, 10 years ago when it was flip this house, flip that house. Oh, it's so easy. You'll go in a weekend and renovate, and you've never renovated a kitchen before, but you're going to do it all yourself. They never once talk about how you finance those or how much money you need to put into them. They're all very much simplified. And I think a lot of people lost their shirt because it made it look like it was so easy. So people dove in when they didn't really know what they were doing. But I think if there's a common theme between what both of you guys are saying is you really got to know your stuff. Right. You got to educate yourself before you dive in. You got to know the markets. You got to maybe go to open houses just to look, just to see what's there. Look at market rents in the area. And like you said, Scott, you create value just based on knowing that that agent who is listing that property didn't have accurate rents, that that property is probably worth a lot more because of that. So really knowing that and working with an agent that understands those market conditions and how to take advantage of them in a favorable way for yourselves or your clients is really, really important. So we're about to run out of time. So I'm going to pose one last question to each of you. What is the one thing you would tell someone who is yet to start investing? If you have one piece of advice, either a mistake to avoid or start right now or whatever it is, Leah, what would be one thing that you would tell people who are maybe listening this down the road about how to just get started?
Sorry, Scott, do you want to go first or us?
I'll go first. Yeah. I think my piece of advice for someone would just be, you need to just go for it. Where I was terrified, I added up my checking and savings account and it was exactly the down payment and closing costs. But if I didn't go for it and waited 3 years, that place that I got for $580 would have easily been $750, $800. I would have been kicking myself. The neighborhood would have already changed. You know, just really making sure you have the right team and agents to help you through it, but just going for it. And I mean, at least open escrow and try it out and do due diligence. You could always, you know, as long as you do it in the right time frame, just get out, but at least you tried. So just go for it. It's scary, but it's definitely life-changing.
That's excellent advice. I wish we would have heard that 20 years ago. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. Our advice, I echo that absolutely. I like making lists. I think if anyone's serious about this, there should be a list of all the team members that you need, and start going out and talking with folks to put the team together. The next part is a list of the neighborhoods that you're really interested in, that are really exciting to you personally, because it's going to take a lot of legwork to become really comfortable with those neighborhoods. And then, the property type that you're most interested in, you know, and that, I think those, what am I missing there?
I think just make it fun. It's an adventure. It's, you know, there are all these pieces you have to put together. You have to evaluate all this stuff. You're looking at all these places. It's, you know, sort of an imaginative exercise every time you're seeing a place, and you get to go through this sort of okay, what if I bought this place? Then I'd have to do this, 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 and this. And it's just, you can make it really fun, have brunch as you're exploring and all of that, and just enjoy the process, because it is exciting. It's a reason to be out there, and it's really good for your future. So
I think too, the key thing is you'll know when it's time to jump, when you'll just know it's time.
Yeah.
You do all the research, you do all the legwork. When you find the property, some part of your brain, you'll be, there's always going to be a little bit of fear. I mean, we've bought 50 places and we're still, we're second guessing ourselves at the closing. Is this the right deal? There will always be some part of your brain that doubts. But if you've done all of your research, the most sober part of your brain will say, all right, I'm ready. Let's do it. You'll know the time.
And you just have to put yourself out there.
Mark, I want to hear more stories. Mark, I want to hear more stories about roofs blowing off things. I don't know why, but other people's make so happy.
Well, we'll have a separate session about that someday, about all the trials and tribulations that I've been through. And yeah, I mean, you name it, I feel like I've been through it, but I don't regret any of it, even despite all of that. I think that's the point. We're all talking about, like, you have to just jump in. You have to be willing to take those financial risks, and you get a reward for it if you do things right and you're smart about it. You want to get your education first. That's definitely a common theme I've heard from all of you guys. But you're going to get knocked on the chin sometimes. And, like you guys mentioned, the building that you decided to buy and then to sell without doing anything to it because it was too much of a project. There's blunders along the way. Scott, I'm sure you've had issues with the tenant, or, you bought something that kind of maybe, oh God, something else better came, 2 months later, and God, I wish I would have bought that one instead, But the point is, people have to start. You just have to start. And once you get going, you start to get better at it, just like riding a bike. And then once you get to a certain level where you feel like you are, at the point where you can make those decisions on the fly, and maybe you don't have to rely quite as much on the spreadsheet, although the spreadsheet's very, very important, don't get me wrong, but you can have that gut feeling, and you'll develop that over time. You're going to be panicked the first time you buy. When I was signing or writing the check for my first contract deposit on any property I bought, which was actually a primary residence, I was terrified, right? I think we've all had that feeling. Like, there's always that doubt, like, oh God, what am I doing? I can't turn back. I'm stuck, when you're signing the closing documents. But I would be hard pressed to find anyone who bought a property 10 years ago that isn't glad they still own it, if they do. So that long game can be really helpful. There are other ways to do it as well. There's the renovations. There's all different ways to do this, which is why we want to get a couple different perspectives. But I think the common themes are that you got to know your stuff. You got to know the neighborhoods. You got to educate yourself and surround yourself with a really solid team. And when you do that, you're not guaranteed success, but the likelihood of success is much, much higher. And I wanted to also highlight the different markets and the different entry points. So if you have, for example, Jason, Leah, you have clients that you think would be investors, but maybe those price points are just a little too aggressive. We want to stretch people's thinking and saying, you know what, maybe Brooklyn isn't the market. Maybe there's somewhere else in New York, maybe upstate, maybe, parts of New Jersey or wherever it may be. Or maybe it be, hey, guys, give Scott a call. Scott can find, a 3-unit investment that makes you $20,000 a month for $500,000, right, Scott? Easy.
Yeah.
When you find that investment, please call me first. I'll jump on it. But I think the point is, we want to stretch those thoughts a little bit, that you don't necessarily have to buy right in your backyard. And I really thank all of you guys for sharing your insights. This was really valuable. I really enjoyed it. I learn every time I talk to other investors, and really appreciate it. So with that being said, we are going to wrap up here. I'm going to share my screen again. To just talk about the next session. Again, next week, we'll be back on at the same time. I'm talking to a financial advisor about all the different implications of, how much money you decide to put down versus finance, and some other interesting aspects of making sure that you're covered financially, that you're not stretching yourself too thin. Even though Scott's story was a success, that he used every penny he had, I would guess the advisor might suggest against that. But again, don't regret you did it. So good for you. So thank you guys to the panelists. Here's everyone's information. If anyone has questions afterwards, please email us, mmteam@freedommortgage.com. I can connect you with Leah and Jason or Scott if that's of interest to you. If something sparked your interest, I'm sure they would be more than happy to collaborate with you, whether you're buying and selling or just needing advice. Sorry, guys, I'm offering free advice from you. I hope you don't mind. And I would be willing to do the same. I have built a really great network of people all around the country who are in different markets. We didn't really get to talk about some of the others, but that's okay. I think today's conversation was a great indication of what's out there. But I would be more than happy to connect you guys with our panelists today or with other professionals. I think we get to a certain point of investing. And again, I'm going to speak for everyone here. I apologize, but you're willing to share with others. And if you have a good attorney, we're willing to refer you to a good attorney. If you have a good contractor, we're willing to share that information. We've all kind of been through the trials and tribulations, and the whole point of being here today is to try to help other people avoid some of the mistakes that we made we to capitalize on the successes. So I hope I haven't spoken out of line here offering free services, but we really appreciate everybody attending. And Leah and Jason and Scott, thank you guys so much for sharing your insight with everybody, and definitely look forward to continuing to collaborate with you guys, both personally and professionally. I think the world of all three of you, and look forward to continuing to collaborate and talking about our successes and failures together. And Jason, call me and I'll tell you about all the crap that I've been through.
Sure, you
from
don't want
start
to
to finish.
Are you sure you don't want to add
there's lots of stories.
date to the list? I mean, let's have a horror stories.
Right.
That'll be
Oh boy. Yes, we will call it all this, and it's still worth it. That will be the title.
Yeah.
But hopefully, these types of sessions will help people avoid some of these common missteps that investors make, and make people feel empowered to jump in and just try it and just do it. Like, that's the key. I think we all shared that sentiment, is that, it didn't go perfectly, but we all wish maybe we had started even sooner. I mean, we've all been at it for a while, but the sooner you start, the sooner you start to build up, and it can be a really, really powerful thing. So thank you guys all for joining us. For those of you for the FPA, just hang on 1 second. We'll put up the slide that shows the URL and the code for your CE credit. And again, thank you to our panelists for joining us today. This is a really enjoyable session for me, and hope you guys all enjoyed it as well. And we will see you next week, same time, same place. All right, everyone,
Thanks,
take
Mark.
care.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.